Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and I just got back from Gencon where I played hours and hours of some of my favorite games. And so I feel like talking about what does it take to become a fantastic game master at a game convention. Now, convention games are kind of like the big leagues in the tabletop RPG hobby. Strangers gather from across the country to play with each other, play some of their favorite games, but also discover new ones, and generally bond over our shared love of this hobby. And at the big conventions like Gencon or Origins, well, they're like the Super Bowl of gaming where gamers expect the best. And running a game at a convention, regardless of its size, is a lot of pressure on GMs. They have to handle experienced players and brand new players, some of which may not even know the rules, and they have to juggle an entire adventure with time pressure. If you're running a game at a con, you're expected to finish a game with an epic ending on a very specific time limit. But being able to game master at a convention will absolutely make you a better game master for your living room group. So even if you never plan on game mastering at a con, these tips that I'm about to share will still apply to your table. All right, let's go. One of the biggest differences between running a game for your friends and running one at a convention is that at a convention, your players are probably all strangers. You probably won't know any of them. And this is a big challenge because every player is going to come into your game with very different expectations about what makes a great game. So what you need to do is remember that adventures are going to break down into generally 4 types of action. You have exploration, NPC interaction and role-playing, action scenes like chases or dodging traps or stealthing around, and then of course you have combat and battles. And players will generally enjoy those 4 things in different amounts. So for the best experience at the table, pick an adventure that contains all 4 of those elements. That way if you have a player who loves combat and is there to beat things up, they won't be completely bored when you spring a purely investigative RPG on them. Variety in convention adventures is really key. Also, most conventions require you to finish your game in under 4 hours, and you really want to end a little early just to give your players enough time to get to their next event. It's such a letdown if your players have to leave before your adventure's over. So err on the side of picking a shorter adventure so you're guaranteed to get through it. Obviously, if you've run an adventure several times before, you'll have a good sense of whether it'll fit into that time slot. But if you haven't run it much, maybe just once or twice, then always go online and ask people who have run it how long it takes them. Because you'd be amazed at how different groups can get through adventures in different lengths of time. What may have taken your group 4 hours could take another group 6 hours to get through, especially if they haven't played the game before. So always triangulate adventure length to make sure you've picked a good one for your convention slot. My second tip is really important, and it's probably one of the main reasons that I've had bad experiences at conventions. A couple of years ago, I was at Origins, and the GM of a Call of Cthulhu adventure sat down and outright admitted that she hadn't deeply read the adventure. What followed was painful. At one point, we walked into a saloon, it was an Old West adventure, and we were looking for a key NPC that would give us the hint as to where we needed to go. And the GM announced that the NPC wasn't at the saloon. So we then spent 30 minutes of real time searching the town, going to the blacksmith, looking in the fields, visiting the church, looking for this NPC, when suddenly she reread that section. She goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry guys. That guy, he was at the saloon, so let's just rewind and we'll pick it up from there." Oh, she missed it, but it was so frustrating for us players. Anybody in this here saloon see Black-Eyed Tommy?
That's me. I'm right
No?
here.
Anyone? Well, shoot, ain't this frustrating?
Right,
the train conductor said he would be here.
I've got a quest
now
for
I'm
you
gonna
and
have to search
everything.
the whole town and the mines and the camps and the fort. So, my advice is to really study your adventure before you run it. Convention games need to move fast, and GMs can't stop to slow down and read what's going to happen in the middle of the adventure. It just kills the momentum. Spend a few hours really getting to know the adventure. Even if you've run it before, reread it like the day or two before you go. Take some notes, make a cheat sheet for yourself. And honestly, like, I really recommend against running an adventure at a convention that you've never run before. That's just really hard, and I know a lot of people want to do that, but I just steer away from that. It's just too full of like pitfalls for players. Conventions are really special occasions for people. They travel to get there, they spend money to go, and they expect to have an amazing time. And your job as a GM is to help give them a memorable experience. And don't forget, even at a long convention, you only play a couple games a day, so each game is taking up a lot of your players' time. So you have to respect that. And so my advice is to really invest in the production values of your game. Like, print out some cool handouts or craft some fun props. Bring pre-generated characters, like print it out on really nice paper. Use cool terrain or miniatures if you have it and you can haul it with you. Just a little bit of extra attention to like the table presence of your game is gonna really impress your players. My friend, Keeper Jeff, recently ran a game of Call of Cthulhu's viral at Gencon. This adventure features a team of YouTube influencers who travel to a remote, haunted island in the Mediterranean. They're broadcasting the whole time as things go horribly wrong for them. Well, Keeper Jeff actually coded up an app on an extra phone that he brought that he could trigger to pour comments and likes in from the fans of those PCs as they're visiting various locations in the game. And afterwards, I heard players just raving about the experience. Like, one of them did something really stupid on the island. Like, his viewers were challenging him to like crawl into a coffin, and he's like, yeah, look, everyone wants me to do this, let's do it. It was fantastic. Now, obviously, not everyone has the skill sets to do something like that, like I can't, but I'm using it as an example of a great way to bring a very special experience to your convention players. Just a search online can find some wonderful handouts that people have created for popular adventures. You can hit my website, oneshotadventures.com, and you'll find handouts that I've made for some adventures. Print them, use them, steal them, whatever you want. It'll make your table better. The best way that you can guarantee a game goes smoothly is to keep everything moving. First, try never to look up rules in the middle of the game unless they're actually like critical to the entire game. Games just grind to a halt when the GM stops to look up a special case rule that might only apply to one situation or one player, when that GM could just make something up reasonable and move on. For example, you can just say, you know, I don't actually remember the radiation poisoning rules in this game, so let's just say you take 2 dice of damage and let's get back to the car chase. Also, remember that many convention players just won't be deeply familiar with the game you're playing. It's very likely you're the only person that's familiar with the rules of this game. And you don't want players slowing down the action because they have to flip through a book that they've never seen before just to kind of understand like the basics of the game. So I always try to bring like printed out cheat sheets of a game with just some of the core rules, or if you have a game with characters that have special abilities or magic spells or items, like I always include little things on the character sheet that sum those up. Players who have the key rules right in front of them are less likely to ask questions, and you can keep the table moving. Of course, don't overwhelm your players either. I've been in some games where like I choose the wizard and I'm not really familiar, and the GM hands me like a packet with 50 spells that I have to like figure out. Just steer away from overly complex characters that require that kind of support to be able to play. I've also seen games slow down when GMs don't successfully balance player participation. Sometimes at a convention, more alpha types will take over the group and GMs will spend more time with that player. It's easy to do. Those players are usually really fun and engaged, but this comes at a cost to everyone else at the table who may be quieter. I've made this mistake before myself, especially in investigative games where like one player can really kind of lead everyone around by the nose. So try to call on the players who aren't participating as much or being quiet and create additional moments for them to shine on the fly. Like maybe if your alpha player's like interrogating a guard and he's had a lot of like table time already, just say, yeah, you know, this guard you're trying to sweet talk just isn't having it. There's just something about your demeanor that just, he's not buying your story. But then the guard actually looks through the party and notices Jen and says, like, hey, didn't you used to work in the bar across the street? Yeah, you were the girl that warned me about that pickpocket, right? Now suddenly, the attention of the table shifts to that player and you've given her a moment to shine and taken it away from the alpha player in a more naturalistic, fun way. Also, don't let scenes linger. Don't be afraid to fast forward. If players have found all the interesting clues in an alleyway, then tell them they've found all the interesting clues in the alleyway and it's probably time that they move on. When you've only got a few hours to finish an adventure, your players will really appreciate this. My last tip is actually my most important one. Remember that your players will reflect the energy that you as a GM are bringing from the moment they sit down at the table. The more enthusiastic you are from minute one, the more invested your players will be in the experience that you're about to create for them. So introduce yourself. Tell them how excited you are to run this adventure with confidence and excitement. That kind of enthusiasm makes just a huge difference at the convention table. I've sat down with GMs before that they're just like, hey, okay, ready to go? And they just like read into a block of text and like, you kind of go in with low energy. But the GMs who stand up and like make a scene as they begin the adventure, like those are my most favorite experiences that I've had. It's also, by the way, important to give your players some time to settle in when they sit down at the table. Like, ask them how the convention is going and introduce the players to each other and ask who's played the game before, etc. A lot of times people are still getting their bearings when they sit down at a table. So enthusiasm's good, but just give it like 5 or 10 minutes before you launch into your adventure, but then launch into it with as much excitement as possible. You're all sailing down the Nile on an old steamship. This was a trip you could barely afford, but when you heard an old British colonel, Colonel Slatters, had unopened a brand new mummy's tomb, you knew you couldn't miss out on this opportunity. But just as you're pulling into port, a strange noise from the very bottom of the boat awakens you from your sleep. It sounds like screeching and scratching and the weirdest thing you've ever heard, a groaning sound coming from within the ship. What do you guys do? Oh, also a bonus tip. Make sure to take a break or two during the game. People at cons are usually tired, hungry, and sleep deprived. And so giving everyone 10 minutes in the middle of a game to grab some soda or coffee is so much appreciated. Plus, you can use that time to make quick tweaks to the adventure. Like if I'm running a little bit behind, I can start up after a break and at a different place. I can say, hey, during the break, you finished exploring that old house, found this strange note in the closet, and now you're all back at the hotel debating the next move. Well, those are my tips for running a great convention game, and I hope that you game masters find them generally useful. And if you found this video generally useful, then don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so I can keep sharing more helpful advice, game reviews, and more. Oh, and if you've had a great or a terrible experience at a convention recently, let me know in the comments below what worked and what didn't work. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, be excited, Game Masters, be excited. You think they're coming back? Oh, morons, right here. I even have an old map.